The war had been going on for 30 years and humanity was losing. Every planet, every colony, every hope seemed to crumble under the weight of the Vrelian Empire's endless fleets. The alien invaders showed no mercy, took no prisoners, and refused every attempt at peace. Earth's greatest diplomats had tried to negotiate. All of them had failed. Most of them were dead. Taeyang stood in the council chamber looking at the faces of the last leaders of humanity. They were tired. They were desperate. And they were out of options. The holographic display showed the current state of the war, and it was not good. Red markers covered most of human space. The Vrelians were winning and everyone knew it. "This is insane," one of the council members said. "You want to send a diplomat to a place that doesn't exist?" Taeyang had expected this reaction. He had expected them to laugh at him, to call him crazy, to throw him out of the chamber. But desperation made people listen to crazy ideas. "The Draken Nebula exists," he said quietly, "and so do the beings that live there." "Dragons," another council member scoffed. "You want us to believe in fairy tales while our people are dying?" Taeyang pulled up an old file on the display. It was ancient, recovered from the ruins of a dead civilization on the edge of known space. The text was difficult to read, translated through 3 different languages, but the message was clear. There were beings in the Draken Nebula, beings of immense power, beings that had once stopped a war that threatened to destroy the entire galaxy. "Every species in this galaxy avoids that nebula," Taeyang said, "even the Vrelians. They go around it. They never enter it. Why? Because something is there, something that scares them." The council was quiet now. They looked at the data, at the old texts, at the map showing how every trade route and military fleet carefully avoided that one region of space. It was strange. It was suspicious. "And it might be their only chance. What do you propose?" the eldest council member asked. "Send me," Taeyang said. "Give me a ship, a small crew, and let me try. If I'm wrong, you lose 1 diplomat and 1 ship. You were going to lose the war anyway. But if I'm right—" He paused, letting the possibility hang in the air. "If I'm right, we might have a chance." They debated for hours. They argued about risks and resources and the madness of chasing legends. But in the end, they agreed. They had nothing left to lose. 3 days later, Taeyang stood on the bridge of the research vessel Silent Promise. It was a small ship, designed for exploration rather than combat. Captain Jiwon stood beside him, her arms crossed, her expression hard. She did not like this mission. She did not believe in dragons or ancient powers or fairy tales. Her brother had died fighting the Vrelians, and she believed in weapons, not wishes. "I still think this is a waste of time," Jiwon said. "I know," Taeyang replied. "If we die out there, no one will even know. The nebula disrupts all communications." "I know. And you still want to do this?" Taeyang looked at her. His face was scarred from a previous diplomatic mission that had gone horribly wrong. He had lost his wife and daughter in that mission. The Vrelians had promised safe passage and then fired on the diplomatic ship. Taeyang had been the only survivor. He had spent years blaming himself, drowning in guilt and grief. This mission was his chance to make things right. "Hard to die trying?" "Yes," he said simply. Jiwon studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. But when we get out there and find nothing, I'm going to remind you that I told you so." The 3rd member of their crew was Haeun, a young xenolinguist who specialized in dead languages and ancient texts. She was brilliant and terrified in equal measure. She had volunteered for this mission because she believed in the research. But now that they were actually going, the reality of it hit her hard. She spent most of the journey to the nebula double-checking her translations, looking for any detail she might have missed. The journey took 2 weeks. As they approached the Draken Nebula, space itself seemed to change. The stars moved in strange patterns. Light bent in ways that hurt to look at. Sensors gave conflicting readings. The ship's instruments flickered and failed, then came back online showing impossible data. "This place is wrong," Jiwon muttered. "Everything about it is wrong." Haeun was staring at her console, her eyes wide. "I'm detecting something," she said. "It's not technological. It's biological, but massive. It's like the nebula itself is alive." Taeyang felt his heart pound. This was it. This was the moment. Either he was right or he had led them all to their deaths in a cosmic graveyard. "Take us deeper," he ordered. They moved slowly into the heart of the nebula. The clouds of gas and dust parted before them as if making a path. And then they saw it, a structure, a fortress made of crystal and light. pulsing with energy that made their sensors scream. It was the size of a moon, floating in the void, ancient and terrible and beautiful. "What is that?" Jiwan whispered. Taeyang could not speak. He had hoped to find something, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. The structure was clearly not natural. It had been built, shaped by intelligence and purpose. And it was old. Older than humanity, older than the Vrelians, older than any civilization currently living in the galaxy. Heian was frantically checking her translations. "The texts mentioned a fortress," she said, her voice shaking. "They said the first ones sleep in a fortress of stars. This must be it. What do we do?" Jiwan asked, looking at Taeyang. He knew what he had to do. The ancient texts had been clear about this part. There was a protocol, a way to approach the first ones. It required courage. It required respect. And it required one simple action that seemed ridiculous but was absolutely necessary. Taeyang walked to the airlock. Jiwan and Heian followed him, confused. He opened a communication channel, broadcasting on all frequencies, and then he raised his hand and knocked on the airlock door. 3 times. Slow and deliberate, the sound echoed through the ship. "What are you doing?" Jiwan asked. "I'm knocking," Taeyang said. "The text said you have to knock. 3 times. To show respect, to show you come in peace, to show you understand the old ways." It seemed insane. It seemed like the action of a desperate man. But Taeyang had studied the text for months. Every culture, every civilization that had encountered the first ones mentioned the knock. It was important. It meant something. For a long moment, nothing happened. The ship drifted in the silence of space. The crystal fortress pulsed with its strange light. And then everything changed. A voice spoke. Not through the radio. Not through any device. It spoke directly into their minds, bypassing sound and language and speaking in pure concepts. It was vast. It was old. It was aware. And it was not pleased at being awakened. Taeyang felt the weight of that consciousness pressing down on him. It was like standing before a judge, before a god, before something so far beyond human understanding that words failed. But he had knocked. He had followed the protocol. He had shown respect. Now came the hard part. Now he had to convince ancient beings of unimaginable power that humanity was worth saving. The voice spoke again, and this time, there was a question in it. A simple question that contained universes of meaning. "Why have you disturbed our sleep?" The voice in their minds was overwhelming. Taeyang fell to his knees, not from fear but from the sheer weight of the presence. Beside him, Heian gasped and grabbed the wall for support. Even Jiwan, who had faced death in battle without flinching, looked shaken. Slowly, something appeared outside the ship. It was difficult to describe because it was not quite physical. It was energy and matter and thought all combined into a form that the human mind could barely process. It looked vaguely like a serpent, but it was kilometers long, made of light and power that pulsed with colors that had no names. "I am Mirai," the voice said, and this time it had taken on something resembling language. "First of the 7, guardian of the threshold. You have knocked upon our door, small one. Speak your purpose or be cast back into the void." Taeyang forced himself to stand. His legs shook, but he stood. He had come too far to fail now. "I am Taeyang of Earth," he said, speaking aloud even though he knew the being could hear his thoughts. "I come on behalf of humanity. We are dying. We are being destroyed by an enemy we cannot defeat. The ancient text said that the first ones might help those who approach with courage and respect. I have come to ask for your help." There was a long silence. Then around the ship, more forms appeared. 6 more beings of impossible power. They were different shapes, different energies, but all equally ancient and terrible. The 7 had gathered. "The ancient texts," Mirai said, and there was something like amusement in her voice. "You found the old words. You understood the protocol. That is interesting. It has been millions of years since anyone knocked." Another voice spoke, deeper and harder than Mirai's. "I am Suho. I say we should ignore this request. Look at them, Mirai. They are children playing with weapons they do not understand. Their kind always destroys itself. Why should we interfere?" A third voice, warmer and filled with something like laughter, joined the conversation. "Come now, Suho. The human had courage enough to find us and wisdom enough to knock. That deserves consideration. I am Daehyun, little human. I'm curious about your species." Taeyang felt the weight of their attention on him. It was like being examined under a microscope by beings who could see every atom of his existence. They could read his memories, his fears, his hopes. There were no secrets before the dragons. Tell us, Mirai said. Why should we wake from our long sleep? Why should the suffering of your species matter to us? Taeyang took a deep breath. This was the moment. He had prepared for this, thought about what he would say, practiced arguments and appeals. But now standing before these ancient beings, all his prepared words seemed hollow. So he spoke the truth. I don't know if it should matter to you, he said. I'm just one man. My species has made terrible mistakes. We've fought wars among ourselves. We've destroyed our own planet. We've done things we're ashamed of. But we're trying to be better. And right now we're being killed by an enemy that doesn't care about peace, that doesn't negotiate, that only wants to conquer. If you let us die, the Vrelians will grow stronger. They'll spread across the galaxy. And eventually they might come here. They might try to wake you through destruction instead of diplomacy. Suho's voice rumbled with anger. Is that a threat, human? No, Taeyang said quickly. It's a warning. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you that if you don't help us, the violence in the galaxy will only get worse. And I don't think you want that. The text said you withdrew from the galaxy because you were tired of war. But ignoring the problem won't make it go away. There was a long moment of silence. The seven seemed to be communicating with each other in ways Taeyang could not hear. Finally, Mirai spoke again. You speak boldly, Taeyang of Earth, but words are easy. We require proof of your worthiness. Long ago we made a contract. We swore never to interfere in the affairs of younger species unless certain conditions were met. You have met the first condition by finding us and knocking with the proper respect. But there are more tests. A seventh voice spoke for the first time. It was older than the others, filled with an exhaustion that came from witnessing eons pass. I am Yunhee, eldest of the seven. Taeyang of Earth, we will ask you 3 questions. Answer them truly and well, and we will consider your request. Fail, and we return to our sleep, and your species faces its fate alone. Taeyang nodded. I understand. I'm ready. The first question came from Mirai. Why should the lives of your species matter more than the peace we have maintained by staying hidden? Our intervention will ripple across the galaxy. We will disturb the balance. Give us one reason why your people are worth that cost. Taeyang felt the weight of the question. They were asking him to justify humanity's existence, to explain why saving his species was worth disrupting the order of things. He thought about all the people back on Earth, all the families huddling in shelters, all the children who had never known peace. We don't matter more, he said finally. No species matters more than another. But all life is connected. If you let the Vrelians destroy us, they won't stop. They'll keep conquering, keep killing, keep spreading their empire. Eventually, the balance you're trying to protect will shatter anyway. Helping us isn't about choosing humanity over peace. It's about stopping a greater threat before it grows too powerful. The dragons were silent, considering. Then Daehyun spoke, and Taeyang could feel the being's approval. A wise answer. You do not claim superiority. You argue for connection. I like this human, Mirai. The second question came from Suho, and his voice was harsh. What makes humanity different from the Vrelians? You both wage war. You both conquer. You both kill. Why should we help one group of killers against another? This question was harder. Taeyang could feel Suho's hostility, his suspicion. The dragon did not believe humanity deserved help. And honestly, Taeyang could not blame him. Humanity's history was full of violence and cruelty. How could he claim they were better than the Vrelians? We're not that different, Taeyang admitted. We've done terrible things. We've fought wars. We've killed each other over land and resources and ideology. I won't stand here and pretend we're innocent. But there's one thing that separates us from the Vrelians. We can change. We can feel regret. We can look at our mistakes and choose to do better. The Vrelians only understand conquest. They've been offered peace dozens of times and they've rejected it every time. Humanity has accepted peace. We've learned from our wars. We've built alliances with former enemies. We're not perfect, but we're trying. As Taeyang spoke, something strange happened. The dragons could see into his mind and they began pulling memories. They saw Earth's history, the wars and the peace treaties, the destruction and the rebuilding. They saw humanity at its worst and at its best. They saw the scientist who gave away a life-saving medicine for free. They saw the soldier who refused to fire on civilians. They saw the teacher who spent her life educating children in a war zone. Daehyun laughed, a sound like stars collapsing into themselves. He's honest. I appreciate honesty. He admits his species' flaws. That takes courage. But Suho was not convinced. Honesty is not enough. They will repeat their mistakes. All young species do. Taeyang waited for the third question, but it did not come. Instead, Mirai moved closer to the ship, her vast form filling their view. There is no third question, she said. Instead, you will face a trial of memory. You will be forced to experience your species' greatest sins. You will feel the weight of every mistake humanity has made, and then you will decide if your people deserve our help. If you can still believe in humanity after seeing the truth of what you are, then perhaps you are worthy. Before Taeyang could respond, the world dissolved. He felt himself pulled from his body, his consciousness scattered across time and space. He tried to scream, but he had no mouth. He tried to reach for Jiwon and Haeun, but he had no hands. The trial had begun. Taeyang was no longer on the ship. He was not anywhere he recognized. He existed in a space between thoughts where memory and reality blurred together. The dragons had pulled him into something beyond normal experience, a place where the past became present and the weight of history crushed down with physical force. The first memory hit him like a hammer. He was standing on a battlefield. Bodies lay everywhere, human bodies torn apart by weapons humans had created to kill other humans. The smell of blood and smoke filled the air. He could hear screaming. He could feel the hatred and fear that had driven people to this place. This was Earth's past, one of the great wars that had nearly destroyed the species. Taeyang wanted to look away, but he could not. The dragons forced him to witness everything. He felt the pain of the dying soldiers. He felt the grief of the families who would never see their loved ones again. He felt the weight of decisions made by leaders who sent millions to die for pride and power. The scene shifted. Now he was in a city as bombs fell from the sky. Buildings exploded. Fire consumed everything. People ran in panic and many of them did not escape. This was the age of nuclear weapons, when humanity had learned to split atoms and use that power to destroy entire cities in seconds. Taeyang fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the horror of it. Look at what your kind has done. Suho's voice echoed through the trial. Look at the cruelty. Look at the waste. This is humanity. This is what you want us to save. The memories continued. Taeyang saw environmental collapse, saw forests burning and oceans dying. He saw the colony wars, when humans spread to other worlds and immediately began fighting over them. He saw betrayal and genocide and suffering on a scale that made him sick. Every terrible moment of human history was laid bare before him. But then something changed. Among the horror, he began to see other moments. Small acts of kindness and courage. A medic running into danger to save a wounded enemy. A scientist refusing to build weapons and instead dedicating her life to feeding the hungry. A community coming together after disaster to rebuild and care for each other. These moments were quieter than the violence. They did not shake the world or make headlines. But they were there, woven through the darkness like threads of light. Taeyang grabbed onto these memories. He forced himself to stand even though the weight of humanity's sins tried to crush him down. Yes, he said to the voice of Suho. Yes, we have done terrible things. But we have also done beautiful things. We are capable of both destruction and creation, and given the choice, most humans choose kindness over cruelty. Suho manifested within the trial. The dragon appeared as a massive form of dark energy, coiled and angry. Most is not enough. Some humans choose cruelty, and they drag the rest down with them. Your species has learned nothing. You still kill each other. You still fight over meaningless differences. Why should we save you from the Vrelians when you cannot save yourselves from your own nature? Taeyang had no answer to that. It was true. Humanity was still fighting. Even as the Vrelians threatened to destroy them, there were still conflicts among human colonies, still political fights and social divisions. The species had not achieved perfect unity or perfect peace. You're right, Taeyang said quietly. We haven't learned everything we need to learn. We still make mistakes. We still hurt each other. But that's not the whole story. The memories shifted again, and now Taeyang saw moments from his own life. He saw himself as a young diplomat, full of hope and idealism, believing he could bring peace to conflicts through words and understanding. He saw the mission where he lost his family, saw the Vrelian ships firing on the diplomatic vessel, saw the explosion that killed everyone he loved. He felt that pain again, fresh and raw. He felt the guilt that had consumed him, the belief that he had failed, that he should have done something different, that their deaths were his fault. But then he saw what came after. He saw himself broken and grieving, slowly putting the pieces back together. He saw himself volunteering for this mission, knowing it might be suicide, but choosing to try anyway. He saw Jiwon, who had lost her brother but still agreed to help. He saw Hyun, terrified but brave enough to face the unknown. "We don't deserve your help," Taeyang said, and his voice was steady now. "I can admit that. We're flawed. We're broken. We make the same mistakes over and over. But we keep trying. Every generation tries to be better than the last. We fail, we fall, but we get back up. That's what makes us human. Not our perfection, but our persistence." Suho circled him, considering. "Pretty words. But words are cheap. Actions define a species, and humanity's actions speak of violence." "Yes," Taeyang agreed, "but also of progress. 1,000 years ago, humans owned other humans as slaves. We don't anymore. 500 years ago, we destroyed our planet's environment without care. Now we work to heal it. 100 years ago, we fought wars over every disagreement. Now we negotiate first and fight only as a last resort. We're slow learners, but we do learn." The trial space trembled. The other dragons were watching, listening. Taeyang could feel their presence surrounding him. They were judging not just his words, but his heart, his intentions, his belief in what he was saying. Daehyun's voice joined the conversation, warm and curious. "He believes what he says. There is no deception in him. He knows his species is flawed, and he asks for help anyway. I find that refreshing," Mirai spoke next. "The trial requires him to face humanity's sins and still defend his species. He has done that. But the question remains, does humanity deserve a chance?" Taeyang felt the weight of that question. He thought about everyone back on Earth, everyone waiting to see if this desperate gamble would pay off. He thought about the children who had never known peace, the families hiding in shelters, the soldiers fighting a losing war. They were all counting on him. "I can't tell you what humanity deserves," he said. "I'm not a judge. I'm just a man who has seen both the worst and the best of my species. I know we're capable of terrible things, but I also know we're capable of better. The Vrelians want to destroy us because we refuse to submit to their empire. We chose freedom over safety. We chose to fight for our right to exist. Maybe that's foolish. Maybe we should have surrendered. But we didn't. We stood up against impossible odds because we believe that freedom matters. That choice matters. That trying to be better even when you fail matters." The trial space began to dissolve. Taeyang felt himself being pulled back toward his body, toward the ship and his physical form. But before he fully returned, one more voice spoke. It was Yoonhee, the eldest, and her voice carried the weight of ages. "You have passed the trial, Taeyang of Earth. You did not claim perfection. You did not make excuses. You simply stood in the truth of what your species is and asked for a chance to be better. That is wisdom. That is courage. We will help you." Taeyang gasped as he returned to his body. He collapsed on the floor of the ship, shaking and exhausted. Jiwon and Hyun rushed to his side. They had been watching his body stand frozen for what seemed like hours, his eyes distant and unseeing. "What happened?" Jiwon demanded. "Are you okay?" Taeyang looked up at them, and despite everything he had just experienced, despite the horror and the pain and the weight of humanity's history, he smiled. "They're going to help us," he said. "The dragons are going to answer our call." Outside the ship, the seven gathered, their forms blazing with power. They had made their decision. But as Mirai had warned, their help would come with a price that would change humanity forever. Taeyang sat in the medical bay of the Silent Promise while Hyun checked his vital signs. The trial had taken a physical toll on him. His body was exhausted, as if he had lived through years in the span of hours. But his mind was clear, clearer than it had been in a long time. The dragons had agreed to help. Humanity had a chance. "Your heart rate is elevated," Hyun said, frowning at the readings. "And your neural patterns are unusual. Whatever they did to you, it left marks." "I'm fine," Taeyang said, though he was not sure that was true. He could still feel the echoes of the trial in his mind. Memories of humanity's past overlapping with his own experiences. "We need to focus on what comes next." Jiwon entered the medical bay, her expression serious. "Mirai wants to talk to you. She says it's time to discuss the terms." Taeyang stood, ignoring the weakness in his legs. He followed Jiwon to the bridge where the view screen showed Mirai's vast form floating beside the ship. She had made herself smaller, more manageable for human perception, but she was still clearly a being of immense power. "Taeyang of Earth," Mirai said. You have proven your species worthy of our aid. The Seven have agreed to intervene in your war with the Vrelians, but our help comes with a price. You must understand this before we proceed. What kind of price? Taeyang asked, though part of him already knew the answer would not be simple. Yunhee's voice joined the conversation. The eldest dragon manifested beside Mirai, her form shimmering with ancient light. When the first ones act, the galaxy changes. We do not simply fight battles and leave. Our power reshapes the fundamental nature of things. If we intervene, humanity will be bound to us. Not as slaves, but as students. For 1,000 years, your species will serve as peacekeepers for this galaxy, guided by our wisdom. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Taeyang felt his heart sink. He had come to save humanity's freedom, not to trade one master for another. You want to control us, he said quietly. We want to teach you, Yunhee corrected. Your species has potential, but you are young and reckless. You need guidance. For 1,000 years, we will help you grow into something greater. You will spread across the galaxy not as conquerors, but as mediators, as peacekeepers, as the example other species look to. Jiwan stepped forward, anger clear in her voice. And if we refuse? If we choose to fight the Vrelians on our own? Mirai's voice was gentle but firm. Then you will lose. The Vrelian Empire is too strong and humanity is too weak. Within a year, your species will be extinct. That is not a threat. That is simply the truth of war. Taeyang felt the weight of the decision crushing down on him. He had authority from the council to negotiate, but this was beyond what anyone had imagined. He was being asked to decide the future of his entire species, save them from extinction but chain them to a 1,000-year contract or refuse and watch humanity die. I need to contact Earth, he said. I need to tell them about this offer. I can't make this decision alone. Of course, Yunhee said. We will wait. But not for long. The Vrelians are preparing their final assault on your homeworld. You have 3 days to decide. The communication lag to Earth was significant, even with the fastest technology humanity possessed. It took hours for Taeyang's message to reach the council, and hours more for their response. During that time, Taeyang paced the ship's corridors, unable to rest, unable to think about anything except the impossible choice before them. Heiyun found him in the observation deck, staring at the crystal fortress in the distance. You look like a man carrying the weight of the world, she said softly. More like the weight of the species, Taeyang replied. I came here to save humanity, but what if I'm just selling their freedom instead? Is it really selling freedom if the alternative is death? Heian asked. She sat down beside him. I've been studying the dragon's offer. 1,000 years sounds like a long time, but for a species, it's relatively short. And they're not asking us to give up our identity. They're asking us to grow up. Under their guidance, Taeyang said. Under their control. Under their protection, Heiyun countered. Think about what humanity has been doing for the last few centuries. We've been stumbling through the galaxy, making mistakes, starting conflicts, barely surviving. Maybe we need help. Maybe we need someone to show us a better way. Before Taeyang could respond, Jiwon's voice came over the comm system. We've got a response from Earth. The council wants to talk to you immediately. The conversation with the council was tense. They appeared as holograms in the ship's communications room, their faces showing exhaustion and desperation. Admiral Hyunwoo, commander of Earth's remaining fleet, led the discussion. We've reviewed your report, Hyunwoo said. The council is divided. Some see this as our only chance for survival. Others see it as surrender. What do you see it as? Taeyang asked. Hyunwoo was quiet for a moment. I see it as a choice between extinction and evolution. I don't like the terms. I spent my life fighting for humanity's independence. But I'm also a realist. We can't win this war. We've been losing for 30 years. If the dragons can save us, maybe we should accept their help, even if it comes with strings attached. Another council member spoke up, an older woman named Soyeon who had once been a colony administrator. But for 1,000 years? What happens to our culture? Our identity? If we're taking orders from ancient beings for that long, will we still be human by the end? We'll be alive, Hyunwoo said bluntly. That's what matters. The debate continued for hours. Arguments flew back and forth. Some council members wanted to accept immediately. Others wanted to refuse and die with dignity. A few suggested trying to negotiate better terms. But Taeyang explained that the dragons had been clear. These were the terms. Take them or leave them. Finally, After the arguments had exhausted themselves, Soyun asked the question that everyone had been thinking. Taeyang, you've met them. You've talked to them. Do you trust them? Taeyang thought about the trial, about the weight of the dragon's presence, about the ancient wisdom and power they represented. Did he trust them? That was a complicated question. I don't think they want to harm us, he said carefully. I think they genuinely want to help us grow. But they're not human. They don't think like we do. 1,000 years is nothing to them. They've lived for millions of years. They don't understand what they're asking us to give up. Then what do we do? Soyun asked. Before Taeyang could answer, Hyun interrupted. She had been working frantically on her datapad during the entire discussion, cross-referencing the ancient texts with the dragon's offer. I found something, she said, excitement in her voice. There's a clause in the ancient contract. The dragons mentioned that their intervention would bind us for 1,000 years, but the texts say there's a way out. If humanity can prove itself capable of maintaining galactic peace on its own before the 1,000 years are up, the contract ends early. Everyone turned to look at her. What do you mean? Hyunwoo demanded. Hyun pulled up the relevant text on the main display. It's a test within a test. The dragons aren't trying to enslave us. They're trying to mentor us. If we can show that we've learned what they're trying to teach, that we can be peacekeepers without their constant guidance, they'll release us from the contract. It could be 100 years or 500 or the full 1,000. It depends on us. Taeyang stared at the texts, hope rising in his chest for the first time since Yoonhee had revealed the price. This changed everything. It was not a prison sentence. It was a challenge. Can you confirm this with the dragons? Hyunwoo asked. Taeyang nodded and immediately contacted Mirai. When he explained what Hyun had found, the dragon's response was something close to amusement. Your linguist is clever, Mirai said. Yes, the clause exists. We did not mention it because we wanted to see if you would find it yourselves. Initiative and research are important qualities in students. If humanity can prove itself capable of maintaining peace without our direct intervention, we will honor the early release clause. But understand, very few species have ever achieved this. Most need the full 1,000 years of guidance. Taeyang relayed this to the council. The mood shifted immediately. It was still a massive commitment, but now it felt like an opportunity rather than a sentence. The vote was not unanimous, but it was clear. Humanity would accept the dragon's terms. Taeyang sent the confirmation to Mirai. We accept, he said simply. Help us, and we'll do everything we can to become worthy of that help. The dragons blazed with power, their forms expanding until they filled the view. Then the contract is sealed, Yoonhee declared. The 7 will wake fully. We will come to your aid. But first we must rest and prepare. Tell your people to hold strong. The Vrelians are coming for Earth, let them come. When they arrive, they will find more than they expected. The transmission ended. Taeyang slumped in his chair, exhausted. He had done it. He had saved humanity. But at what cost? Only time would tell. The Vrelian armada arrived at Earth exactly 3 days after the contract was sealed. They came with 3,000 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled by their empire. It was a show of overwhelming force meant to crush any remaining human resistance and prove to the galaxy that the Vrelian Empire was unstoppable. Warlord Kiwan stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the small blue planet that had resisted his empire for 30 years. He felt satisfaction knowing this would be the last battle. After today, humanity would be nothing but a memory and a warning to other species who thought they could defy the Empire. Deploy the fleet in attack formation, Kiwan ordered. I want every human military installation destroyed within the first hour. Then we'll deal with the civilian centers. His officers moved to obey, but one of them hesitated. Sir, our sensors are detecting unusual energy readings from the human fleet. Their ships are arranged defensively, but there's something else. Something in the space behind them. Kiwan looked at the tactical display. The human fleet was pitifully small, maybe 300 ships against his 3,000. They were positioned around Earth like a thin shell, clearly preparing to make a final stand. But there was indeed something strange behind them. A distortion in space growing larger. What is that? Kiwan demanded. Unknown, sir. It's not matching any known technology. The energy signature is massive, beyond anything we've encountered. Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, looking at the Vrelian armada with calm determination. His crew was tense. They all knew they were outnumbered 10-1. Under normal circumstances, this battle would be over in minutes. But circumstances were no longer normal. Status of the dragons? Hyunwoo asked. They're coming, his tactical officer reported. The energy distortion is expanding. Estimated time of arrival, 2 minutes. Open a channel to all ships, Hyunwoo ordered. Tell them to hold formation. No matter what happens, we hold this line until the dragons arrive. Across the human fleet, crews prepared for battle. Weapons charged, shields powered up. Everyone knew they just needed to survive long enough for help to arrive. But 2 minutes can feel like forever when facing overwhelming force. Kiwon grew impatient with the delay. I don't care what that energy reading is. We attack now. All ships advance and fire at will. The Vrelian fleet surged forward. Thousands of weapons locked onto human ships. The sky above Earth lit up with weapon fire. The human fleet returned fire, but it was like throwing stones at a tsunami. Ship after ship took damage. Crews died. The line began to buckle. And then the dragons arrived. The space behind the human fleet tore open and 7 beings of cosmic power emerged. They were no longer the contained forms they had shown to Taiyang. Now they revealed their true scale, their true might. Each dragon was a force of nature given consciousness. They were energy and matter and pure will shaped into forms that hurt to look at directly. Mirai appeared first, a serpent of light kilometers long. Behind her came Daehyun, Suho, Yunhee, and 3 others whose names humans had not yet learned. They positioned themselves between the human fleet and the Vrelian armada, a living wall of ancient power. Mirai's voice boomed across every communication channel in the system. This species is under our protection. Withdraw now or face extinction. Kiwon stared at the display in disbelief. The energy readings were going insane. His sensors could not properly measure what they were seeing. It was as if reality itself had fractured and something from beyond normal space had entered their dimension. What are those things? One of his officers whispered. I don't know, Kiwon said. But I don't care. They're just 7 against 3,000. Continue the attack. It was the last order he ever gave. Daehyun moved first. He did not fire weapons or launch missiles. He simply unmade things. Where his attention focused, Vrelian ships ceased to exist. They did not explode. They did not break apart. They simply stopped being, as if they had never been built in the first place. Matter returned to energy. Complex structures dissolved into their component atoms, and those atoms scattered into the void. In 17 seconds, half the Vrelian fleet was gone. The remaining ships tried to flee, but Suho was faster. He appeared around them like a net of dark energy, cutting off their escape routes. The other dragons joined in, not with violence, but with overwhelming power that made resistance meaningless. Ships that tried to fight back found their weapons refusing to fire. Ships that tried to run found their engines failing. The dragons did not destroy the remaining fleet. They simply stopped it, held it in place like insects in amber. Across the galaxy, every species with the capability to observe watched what was happening. The dragons were real. They had returned. And they had chosen humanity. Kiwon's flagship was one of the few ships the dragons left operational. Mirai moved close to it, her vast form filling every view screen. Warlord Kiwon, she said, her voice speaking directly into his mind. You have been given a chance to withdraw. You chose to attack instead. Now you will carry a message back to your empire. This war is over. If the Vrelians continue their aggression, we will not be so merciful next time. Kiwon's pride warred with his fear. Part of him wanted to order one last attack, to go down fighting rather than accept defeat. But he had just watched half his fleet disappear like smoke in wind. What could conventional weapons do against beings like these? Fall back, he ordered, the words bitter in his mouth. All ships retreat to the home system. The surviving Vrelian ships fled, leaving the battlefield behind. The human fleet had won without firing more than a few shots. Earth was saved, but Taiyang, watching from the silent promise, felt no triumph. He knew this was not over. The dragons had stopped the fleet, but they had not stopped the war. The Vrelians would regroup. They would come back with more ships, more weapons, more determination. This cycle of violence would continue unless something changed. We need to go to the Vrelian homeworld, Taiyang said suddenly. Jiwon looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Why? Because showing force isn't enough, Taiyang explained. The dragons proved they can destroy the Vrelians, but that just makes the Vrelians more desperate. If we want real peace, we need to talk to them. We need to offer them the same choice the dragons gave us, change or perish. Admiral Hyunwoo was skeptical when Taeyang proposed the plan, but he also understood the logic. You want to go into enemy territory and negotiate with people who have been trying to kill us for 30 years. Yes, Taeyang said simply, because if we don't, the dragons will eventually have to destroy the entire Vrelian civilization, and that would make us complicit in genocide. We came to the dragons because we wanted to save lives, not take them. Let me try to save both species. Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, but you're taking an escort this time. And if things go wrong, we're pulling you out immediately. Taeyang, Jiwon, and Hyun traveled to the Vrelian homeworld aboard a diplomatic ship escorted by Dragon Mirai herself. Her presence ensured safe passage. No Vrelian ship dared approach them. The Vrelian homeworld was a fortress covered in military installations and defensive platforms. The capital city was built for war, with massive structures housing the Empire's government and military leadership. Taeyang's ship was granted permission to land, but the atmosphere was hostile. They met in a great hall where the Vrelian council gathered. Kiwon was there, his face showing barely contained rage. Other Vrelian leaders looked fearful, angry, confused. They had never imagined defeat was possible. Why are you here? One of the council members demanded. You've already won. The dragons proved that. Why not just destroy us and be done with it? Taeyang stood before them, feeling the weight of countless eyes on him. Because that's not what we want, he said. We never wanted to destroy the Vrelian Empire. We just wanted to survive. For 30 years we tried to negotiate peace. You refused every time. But now things have changed. The dragons have given us the power to end this war completely. We could wipe out your entire civilization, but we're not going to do that. Instead, we're offering you a choice. What choice? Kiwon spat. Surrender or die. Change or remain the same, Taeyang corrected. The galaxy is evolving. Species are learning to cooperate instead of conquer. The dragons have given humanity a mission to become peacekeepers, to help other species find better ways to resolve conflicts. We're offering to help the Vrelian Empire transition from conquest to cooperation. You can keep your government, your culture, your identity, but you have to stop the aggression. You have to stop seeing every other species as something to be dominated. The council chamber erupted in argument. Some Vrelians saw this as an insult, a demand that they give up everything that made them strong. Others saw it as a way to survive. The debate raged for hours. Finally, Kiwon stood. This is weakness, he declared. The Vrelian way is strength through conquest. I will never accept peace with humans or anyone else. We should fight to the last warrior rather than accept this shame. But as Kiwon spoke, Taeyang noticed something. The other council members were not nodding in agreement. They were looking at each other with uncertain expressions. They were tired. They had been fighting for 30 years and had nothing to show for it except losses and defeat. One of the council members, an older Vrelian named Sojung, stood up. Warlord Kiwon, your courage is admirable, but courage without wisdom is just stubbornness. We have seen what the dragons can do. We cannot win this fight, and even if we could, what would we gain? More planets? More resources? More enemies? I am tired of war. I vote to accept the human offer. Other council members began to speak up, agreeing with Sojung. One by one, they turned away from Kiwon's vision of endless conquest and toward the possibility of peace. Kiwon watched in horror as his support crumbled. You are all cowards, he hissed. But the decision was made. The Vrelian Council voted to accept humanity's terms and end the war. Kiwon refused to accept defeat. He tried to flee, planning to gather loyal forces and continue the fight. But his own people stopped him. The Vrelians were not giving up their pride. They were choosing survival. Kiwon was removed from power, and new leadership took his place. The war ended not with humanity's destruction, but with humanity's unexpected victory through the power of ancient allies and the courage to offer peace even to enemies. Taeyang returned to Earth as a hero, but he did not feel like one. He had saved humanity, but at the cost of binding them to a 1,000-year contract with beings they barely understood. He had stopped the war, but by threatening the Vrelians with extinction. Nothing felt clean or simple. The dragons remained in the galaxy, watching and guiding as promised. Mirai visited Taeyang one last time before retreating to the nebula. You did well, Taeyang of Earth, she said. You showed courage, wisdom, and compassion. These are the qualities we look for in species worthy of advancement. Will we make it? Taeyang asked. Will humanity be able to fulfill the contract and become what you hope we can be? Mirai was quiet for a moment, her vast form shimmering with ancient light. That is for you to discover. The dragons can guide, but we cannot force change. Humanity must choose its own path. But I believe you will surprise us. You already have. She withdrew then, returning to her sleep in the crystal fortress. The other dragons followed. They would watch from a distance, intervening only when absolutely necessary, letting humanity grow at its own pace. Taeyang stood on Earth, looking up at the stars, knowing that everything had changed. The universe had trembled when he knocked on the dragon's door, but it was the answer that changed everything. Humanity had been given a second chance, a path to something greater. Now they just had to walk it. The universe trembled when the human knocked, but it was the answer that changed everything.